free to exit that out on your side. It still keeps the transcription for me, so you're not doing anything that's going to disrupt my my worlds if you are exiting that stuff out for yourself. Okay. So as I already said, we're going to be talking about creating inclusive classrooms. We're going to be talking about these strategies for equitable learning environments and thinking about meeting student needs, whether or not they know how to express those needs. And being a little bit proactive about that instead of reactive. We're going to be reactive sometimes because somebody's going to come to us with something that we never considered, or that might cause us to change things that we've already been doing, and that's fine. But sometimes we can sort of build up our courses expecting that students might have specific needs, or that realizing that the environment that we've been creating maybe isn't necessarily working, and we can do better. So as I said a little bit earlier, I'm Dr. Lindsay Freeland. Y'all can call me Lindsay. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an inclusive teaching coordinator here at NIU. And I work for the Center of Innovative Teaching and Learning. So if you have questions about your teaching, if you have questions about technology that you're using, Blackboard, Teams, Zoom, we cover a lot of things. Navigate isn't under us, but we can help you navigate stuff out to get you in contact with our Navigate friends. But any sort of teaching and learning tools that you're using in your classrooms, we can help answer questions about that. We can also help answer questions about like pedagogy, assignment sheets, all of that stuff, making things accessible, videos, all that. And I'll be sending out my contact information after this. I think all of you have been to workshops before through CITL, so you get the email at the end. We send out a link to the video that we recorded, and then resources, and then you get my contact information too, so that we can become best friends is my goal. But also so you can talk to me, reach out when you have questions, concerns as things come up. Okay, I'm going to turn off my little face now. And I'll talk a little bit about our objectives today. So we're going to gain some practical skills on how to create a more inclusive classroom through intentionally created classroom management techniques. We only have an hour, so we're not going to walk away with a huge stack of things, but we're going to start these conversations at least. And we're also going to explore some methods to foster a positive and inclusive classroom culture where people are feeling respected and included. And we're going to recognize the difference between inflexible and non-negotiable policies and punitive practices. There we go. So when we think about policies that we're creating for our classrooms, I always like to say that we want to focus on community, not compliance. So the focus is on building our students up, getting everybody to come to class, to want to share, to want to be part of the classroom, instead of forcing them into the classroom because they're going to be missing half of their grade if they don't attend all the classes. So what can we do in order to welcome them and have students feel good about coming to class? And I'll say that even if you have the best policies, not every student is going to show up, and that's a complex thing, and it's not necessarily like on the instructor every time. But you know, we can do things that are built into our syllabus and are built into day one to let students know what kind of environment we are working on building, and then that carries over for the rest of the semester. So if we have rigid policies, they're going to be focused on power and compliance. about you telling students you must do this thing or this is how you're going to be punished. Um, so there are punitive practices, again, punishment for not complying or conforming. This is how you have to demonstrate that you did the reading. You have to respect me by raising your hand. You have to ask me if you are going to be leaving the classroom to use the bathroom. You have to disclose things about your body, about your needs in order to get permission to leave the classroom. Sometimes we have spaces where students are in that they cannot be walking in and out of like freely, right? Like if we have a chemistry lab and we're working with things, it can be dangerous for students to just be, coming and going as they please. So that, not all of these things are a one and done that you can just like change the language and it's perfect. But I think that we need to think a little bit about the type of control that we have over our students and how we're trying to control their body and their needs. So flexible policies on the other hand, are focused on community engagement. Uh, they're focused on restorative practices. So if there's a mistake or a behavior that feels bad, um, we're seeking the root cause of that, and then we can learn to change that. So if a student is, being disruptive, if they're talking over other people, maybe there's some reason behind that. Maybe there's a way for us to have a conversation with them or talk about like, what does that feel like in this classroom? Is this the space to be doing that, instead of marking them down for participation points for the day? So we're not just like adjusting their grade, we're actually having conversations, which can be hard, but we're talking with them about these things, and maybe it's that they're interrupting because they're so excited to talk about this topic in class, or they're really frustrated because that person said something really racist and they felt like that wasn't being addressed. So sometimes there's like very valid reasons behind what's going on, instead of just saying this behavior is disruptive. We don't have room for that in our classroom. We can have conversations, whether it's the larger classroom or one-on-one with the student, to uh, see what's going on and to learn from it together, to adjust our policies or adjust our thinking or redirect that behavior. Um, and we also want to think about inclusive practices versus inequitable practices. So inequitable practices, there's loss of grade due to uncontrollable actions. So sometimes students have needs, but they don't have the paperwork from the Disability Resource Center to demonstrate those needs. Sometimes students have things that come up in their lives that, you know, cause everything to go off the rail, and they just don't have the mental capacity or the time or the energy to do the things that they need to for class. So the automatic 2-day extension for something isn't going to work for them because they were hospitalized for a week. So setting up systems that aren't going to work for everybody and are creating no wiggle room isn't very equitable. Sometimes we have to create systems that don't work for everybody, by the way, but like we can say like, come talk to me, or add in some language and create an environment where they know they can approach you about these things. But inclusive practices provide options, and they are built with understanding that students have changing needs. So we have students who have disabilities that are long-term, that are going to be something that they are experiencing for their lives. We have students that have temporary disabilities. They break a leg, they have health problems due to pregnancy or something that's going to limit their mobility or their ability to focus on work, whether or not they're in and out of the hospital. Um, so we have to keep these things in mind, that our students have lives outside of the classroom, and these needs change, and sometimes they're unpredictable, and sometimes they don't know the best way to get help for these needs. They don't know that they can get something from the DRC. They don't know what kind of things they need in order to get extensions on paper, or on papers, or to get an incomplete for the class and be able to finish that work later. So we need to be able to communicate that with them so that they know what's going on. As I mentioned earlier, we can't anticipate every issue, um, but we can think about what our students often need and be open to discussion and feedback. So if we're seeing a lot of students need extensions on this one assignment, because they get feedback on a draft and they don't have enough time to turn around and work on it within a week to get it the final turned in. So maybe we still have that deadline of a week, but then we have an automatic 1 week extension on that. Um, Maybe we're seeing that students need additional feedback on something because they're making the same mistakes over and over. So maybe we built in something where they can have um, a writing uh, a writing day in class where we're working together to correct these common errors. Um, Maybe we're seeing that things that are due immediately after students go home for Thanksgiving aren't being turned in because students aren't doing work over that break. So we're thinking about how we might change deadlines or build in an extension because of that. And we can also survey our students and get feedback on what they say they need. You know, we can observe trends, but we can also just directly ask them, like, what would be helpful for you? Anonymous surveys are great, but also if you have a class that's really chatty and really open, then just asking them in general, or even having them do like little focus groups together so that they feel comfortable giving you feedback, and are bolstered by a group doing so, that might be helpful and work for you too. When you are setting up a course, it's okay to have non-negotiables. It's okay to be like, I'm not going to answer emails after this time, or I'm not going to accept this behavior in class. Um, that's totally fine. You can be upfront and still encourage them to discuss their needs with you. There's always workarounds for those things too. So, like, I'm not going to answer any emails after 5 p.m. Your assignment is due at 8 p.m. So any questions that I receive after 5 p.m. for an assignment, like, uh, that's okay. You have an automatic built-in extension. I'll get to them after 8 a.m. then following day, whatever that looks like. Um, I encourage you, if you're having students turn things in at midnight and you are going to be available to respond to student questions, which I'm not saying you should be at that time, think about those deadlines and think about whether or not it's makes sense for them to turn something in at midnight if you're not going to be available for 7 hours to answer questions as they're working on stuff and as they're turning it in. Does it make more sense to have them turn it in by 5 p.m. the following day instead? Um, what was that? That was the tangent. Okay. And I also encourage you all to set aside your ego, which is really hard for everybody. But student behaviors aren't always about you. It can feel like really disrespectful if somebody is sending you an email at 2 a.m. or is speaking in a way that feels demanding or entitled, that they're not turning in work, but they want all of your flexibility, that they're not recognizing you as a human that has needs too. Um, but I really want to say that students don't need to share every personal detail with you in order for you to meet their needs. I've had professors come in and talk to me specifically about students who are disabled or students who are neurodiverse that don't have accommodations through the DRC, and will they don't know how to help these students. They should be medicated. They should do this. They should do that. The student had this terrible experience and they wanted an extension, and I didn't know how to give them an extension until they told me exactly what happened to them. And we can't ask students to share these like really personal things with us. We can just know that they have needs. They can express like, I need an extension on something. And we can have a conversation based off of that. We don't have to come in with demands or being suspicious that they're trying to take advantage of you. Whether or not they need an extension because they had this really traumatic experience happen, or because they're realizing they are having a hard time concentrating on work within a specific environment, or because they just forgot about it, they still need the extension. And they might still be able to demonstrate that they know the thing that you're asking them to demonstrate that they know. So we might still have a student that can be successful even though they're not meeting the initial deadlines. So specifically talking about class policies and management, again, we're all from spaces where we're not necessarily going to be using labs. You might be teaching in a space that does have technology that we aren't able to have food and drinks in. So that might be a barrier. But generally speaking, if you're able to within the classroom, let students move and drink and eat and fidget. Um, that's something that people can do to regulate themselves in order they can meet their needs in order to be in a better mood. If a student hasn't eaten all day and they need that protein bar, um, like let them have it. They're going to be in a better place. They're going to be able to learn better. They're probably going to be in a better mood too. Um, it's possible that it's distracting or dangerous for students to be moving in the classroom, to be eating or even drinking. Um, but we can talk with our class about where they can do that um, safely or in a way that disrupts people minimally. So if there is a student that needs to be able to leave the classroom because they have specific needs where they need to be using the restroom or they need to be testing blood sugar or whatever, and that's a regular thing that they need to be doing, we can talk to them about where they might sit in the classroom, so they're not obstructing people's views when they're coming in and out of the classroom. If we have a student that needs to be able to stand or move because of a physical disability, because of chronic pain, because of blood flow, we can talk with them about where that might happen, in order for them to be able to still be part of the classroom and to pay attention, but also, again, not disrupt other people, or provide a minimal disruption. And then if that proves to be disruptive, we can also talk with the rest of the class about, okay, where would you like to move then? Because, students assign themselves seats and then we'll never move for the rest of the semester. But we can talk about, we can move if this is disruptive. If you don't like sitting next to the door, maybe sit over here instead. Um, Students love to put their hands on their phones. I do it all the time too. And it's really like just this thing that we do with our hands. It's a fidget sort of, what do I want to say? It calms that need. Excuse me. And so if you're finding that students are doing a lot of like touching their phones, even if it doesn't seem like they're actively texting, they're just like touching their phones a lot. They have their phones out. They're playing with their pop sockets. They're clicking their pens. Um, we can do things like having fidgets in the classroom. I love pipe cleaners for this. I think that it's really, really smart. It's something that it makes zero noise. They're very cheap if you want to bring in your own pipe cleaners and have them in class. You can also have students turn them back in at the end of the day so that you don't have to buy a bunch. Um, but it's a great way for people to distract their hands so that they can still listen and not create an environment that is loud for other people, because some of us fidget with things that are loud. I have a fidget ring and it does make a noise. Um, and so I recognize that that might be distracting for other people, but it's also something that helps me when I'm waiting in like the doctor's office or when I'm waiting before a meeting, so that I'm not just necessarily on my phone because I don't know what to do with my hands. Um, we can also create space for quiet work. And maybe students are listening to their own music. Maybe we're playing quiet music in the classroom. We're recognizing that sometimes brains don't work really well if it's completely quiet in a space. Um, we also want to keep in mind accommodations. I talked about accommodations already a little bit, but again, students have disabilities, they have neurodiversity, and they have other human needs and unpredictable events that come up that they need to take care of things or they need to take care of themselves. And sometimes they just don't even know how to do that. Um, it's not uncommon for students to have, something come up with a parent or a grandparent, and they're sort of like, this thing happened, I don't know what to do. They don't know whether they should go home. They don't know what kind of caretaking they're going to have to do. And so being open to having those conversations and um, creating an environment where students can come back, can miss, can still stay on track is huge. When we're thinking about attendance, um, we want to consider what we expect from students and is it achievable for all of our students. So if our students have children that are going to be off of school because of breaks, is this achievable for them to meet the expectations for attendance if they're not able to bring their kids to school? Um, if a student has a full-time job and is given extra hours and needs that pay, are we creating an environment where we're shaming them for missing class because they have an opportunity to work or they're being told they have to work? If a student has chronic illness and has things come up like Crohn's, I have celiac disease, and generally doesn't causing me to feel unwell, but I can generally continue on with my life if I'm experiencing um, a bad day from being exposed to gluten, but other people it's debilitating for them. So are we creating environments where our students are being understood if they can't physically show up, and we're giving them opportunities to demonstrate that they're still doing the learning, that they can still access that knowledge and be successful in our class? Um, and are we keeping attendance in a way that's known by all of our students and encourages them to have conversations with us, but not avoid us? So if we're doing an attendance sheet, um, Do they know what that looks like? Is that something that they're going to have a friend scribble down a name for them? Um, is that something that you're actively, using to follow up with students when you see that they're gone and you haven't heard from them? Some people keep attendance by participation alone. So if a student doesn't talk for the day, they don't get points, which is, can be problematic for students that are hard of hearing, are deaf, maybe are using accessibility matters, but aren't able to necessarily catch everything that's happening in the class and might find it hard to participate. Maybe your student has strep throat and they can't speak. There are a lot of things that might be barriers. So what are we doing to make sure that our students, we're keeping track of who's in the class, what's going on with them, but also we're being thoughtful and encouraging them to come talk to us if they're not able to be in class. And that's not to say that you can't give grades for attendance. That's just saying, like, we want to be mindful of that. How are we doing that? And is the system that we're using the best system? Grading, I'm sure, especially in curriculum and instruction, and I know this is true in English, we want to make sure that we're scaffolding learning and assignments, that we have clear expectations and we're setting realistic timelines. So we're not saying turn in this 5-page essay next week. We're saying, oh, over the next few weeks, we're going to be working towards this 5 pages. I want you to write the thesis statement. And we're going to talk about that first. Okay, what are the resources that you're going to be collecting? Let's look at that. When we go into higher level classes, we're probably not going to be looking over those individual pieces of the assignment so much in class, but we can still introduce bigger assignments, have students be able to work on them over a series of weeks, and we can remind them going back in class and saying, oh, this would be a great resource that you might add to your paper, or, oh, that's such a great idea. Maybe that's a thesis that would be for this assignment. And sort of build them up and get them thinking about the assignment and the things that you're working on in class, contextualize it to that bigger assignment, um, so that they have an idea of what's going on. Um, Giving options for assessments. For English, this is happening more and more, where we're moving away from the traditional essay. Like, first year writing is going to be focused on writing, but if you're creating a speech that's in a video, or if you're creating a PSA or something along those lines, there is still composition that's happening, whether it is like writing a formal essay or creating this narrative, writing down general notes to follow, whatever, that's still a form of composition. And for students that are taking classes like speech, maybe they're not able to be physically in class when they're supposed to be giving their speech, but maybe they can do a video instead of a live performance. Maybe they can do a persuasive podcast instead of a persuasive essay. Um, Maybe they can do a true crime podcast instead of writing a history paper about an event. Um, I think, again, we're moving towards this more and more, of like not grading what we're not teaching or supporting. So if your students are expected to follow APA format, but you don't go over that at all in class, um, that's a problem. So probably shouldn't be worth 30% of that grade for that assignment. If you're not going to actively teach APA format, are we providing resources where students know where to find things about that? Are you encouraging them to come to office hours to look over their formatting, or sending them to their writing center to look over that stuff? Are you giving them templates for what that might look like? Are you encouraging them to go to specific sites instead of just Chat GPT in order to work on their citations? Um, and also, are we leaving room for mistakes and human needs by using revisions, redos, tutoring, extensions. I always tell my students turning in something is better than turning in nothing. And so if they were supposed to write, 3 paragraphs in response to a couple questions about, racism and pop culture, and they turn in, 2 sentences. Okay, what's going on with those 2 sentences? Can I give them any sort of credit? And can I give them an opportunity to then do some revisions, ask for an extension, but I still have something that I can see as a draft? I could give them feedback on, is it possible for them to come talk to me during office hours and demonstrate that they have that knowledge, and we can help give them some more points. Because there are things that come up, or just a misunderstanding about assignments, and sometimes assignment sheets are confusing and are complicated. I've also had students that have arthritis, and it's really hard for them to type. And so, when you ask for a 5 paragraph essay, they might turn in something that is more like 10 sentences long. Um, can you grade those 10 sentences and see whether or not those things are great? Can you show them tools that they might use, like talk to text tools, where they can think through their ideas, they can get text down on a page, and then they can just work on editing that. We can talk about those resources. But if they turn something in, you can start giving them points and not create a hole that they're not going to be able to dig themselves out of. I also want to think about instructional strategies. So, are we diversifying how we are instructing our students? If we're giving lectures, are they mini lectures? Are we doing guided discussions? So that's what I call like having discussion questions that you want to get to, where you're sort of leading students, but then they can go off on tangents and make connections on their own. Are we doing small group work or parent share? Are we doing in-class activities? Breaking up you talking at students. So this workshop, for instance, this is not how I would teach my classes. We have an hour and we have X amount of information I want to get through. But this doesn't work for a lot of students to sit and just listen to somebody talk at them for, 50 minutes. So breaking up what you're going over and doing activities, making sure they have a chance to talk, that's going to be really, really useful. And we also want to make sure that we're diversifying interaction with concepts. So for a lot of people, thinking in the abstract is like really, really difficult. So can we provide visual aids? Maybe it's charts, maybe it's diagrams, maybe it's photos, demonstrations, hands-on activities, videos, guest speakers, even student presentations, in order for them to get information and contextualize it and understand it differently. One of the things that I think has been really important that I've heard from students is history seems like very abstract, like it's just existing out in this space and they don't really know what to do with that information. But if you can create, timelines and also associate it with like pictures, that's very, very useful for our students to understand that this existed, or this happened at a time that predated photography, versus this that we have photographic evidence of. Like, little things like that help sort of situate and contextualize information and help it sink in a different way, which might seem silly, but our brains are really complex and strange. Guest speakers also tend to be really, really helpful. Having somebody new come up to the front of the class and talk to your students can be really helpful. If you can't get a guest speaker, maybe you can integrate a podcast or a video that exists. Group work is also a great way for us to encourage students to think about things differently and feel like they're part of the community a little bit more. Um, when students are confused, they feel a little bit more emboldened to speak up and receive help because they have other people to back them up or to confirm, yeah, this is confusing too, or if the other people in the group have the answer, they can also help them with that. But we also want to make sure that we're using contracts or we have ground rules for our group work, and making sure that our students aren't expected to do something that is unfair or might exploit one student or create a power dynamic that is strange or icky. Um, and another thing with group work is that asking students to work on things together outside of class can be really, really complicated, especially if we have students that are parents that have jobs, have other things going on, are in sports. So if that's something that we're asking our students to do, if they have a group project, we should be giving them time in class to get those things done. Um, or at least to be checking in with each other if they're working independently outside of the classroom, because we can't expect them to all be free during the same stretches of time. Um, and letting students grade themselves for group work and being flexible with that too. Like, can we change groups when necessary because of the dynamic? Does it make sense for us to put students that aren't available during the same times together, that are involved in a similar sport or have similar schedules together, to protect students sometimes too, all that are that have identities that aren't well received by other people in that group. We don't want these students to be homophobic or transphobic, but um, we aren't necessarily able to change their minds automatically. So can we take the student who is feeling uncomfortable, who is uh, feeling discriminated against, and put them in a space where they are taken care of a little bit more? Okay, we are coming up on what, 11 minutes left. So I'm going to be sending out this stuff, but I want to make sure that we have a chance to talk. So I will briefly go over the rest of this stuff, and again, I'll share out this stuff a little bit later. But I really want to make sure that we do get a chance to talk. So I will say that creating community agreements is a really great idea. And allowing students to have a say in the class policy, to see what they expect from each other, and to give them a chance to push back on things that they don't think work for them, for their brains, for their bodies, for their schedules. Um, and then I mentioned earlier about identifying non-negotiables. So those would be probably syllabus statements about things like divisive language, focusing on humanity. So I have the example of two syllabus statements that um, I've used in the past. The one on the bottom about using divisive language, that focuses, or that is something that was used in the English department, specifically. I believe Melissa Adams Campbell created that statement. So about using correct language surrounding people who are undocumented and not calling them illegals. Um, Talking and specifying the language that is appropriate for those situations. I've done similar things regarding gender and sexuality. And I also have a statement about debating the right of anybody to exist or have rights. So this idea that humans deserve dignity and deserve to have access to things, and if we want to have questions um, about specific groups of people, and about whether or not we believe they should have rights or access to specific things. Students can have those discussions with me because sometimes they just need to critically think about the topic, but that's not necessarily going to happen in class in front of those people who have those identities, and we're not going to question whether or not um, these people should live or have health care or whatever it is. Something else that I think is really, really helpful and important is sharing content warnings so that we can create spaces where we're making sure that our students are prepared to have conversations. They're able to come into class and participate and not just be reactive to the things that are going on. A lot of us aren't teaching things that are too what do I want to say aren't necessarily like too violent or sexual in nature, but if you're going to be talking about a piece of art that is depicting assault or something like that, we might want to talk about that before we show that visual. If we're going to be showing a clip from a documentary that depicts somebody hurt, there's blood, we want to bring that up so that students are prepared for it and we can have a conversation about something other than that particular thing. Um, we know where that conversation is going to go. And then I'll also say that in order to create inclusive environment, we want to make sure that we're supporting our LGBTQ plus students. So we are thinking about queer and trans students and their identities. So if we're talking about what families look like, we're not assuming that all of the families are heterosexual. We're not assuming that everybody in our class is cisgender or heterosexual. We're not assuming that they all want to get married or can get married. We're not making assumptions about their identities or talking as if only these things only there's a binary gender, and if you're not this thing or this thing, then you're doing it wrong. And create space for our students to show up as they are. um, okay, so I would love for you all, let me turn my little face back on. There I am. So we've got 5, 6 minutes left. Um, and again, I've done a lot of talking, but I want to make sure that you all get a chance to share any insights that you have or any questions that you have. Um, so I'm actually going to stop the recording too.